This morning on our continuing series, Forever Young, A Guide to Life After 50, dealing with your child's divorce. It's the subject of an article in the September issue of New Choices magazine where Jane Addams writes, Your Child Divorcing, How You Should Feel and Act. Jane Addams, good morning. Nice to see you.
Matt.
It's a difficult time for parents and for children. There's guilt, there's sadness, there's frustration. You say most important thing for parents to do is accept the situation.
That's right. You know, your kids have a right to make their own choices about their lives, and they are adults with an adult's right. Doesn't make the heartbreak any less. Doesn't make the anger and the guilt and the recrimination, what did I do? Why do we feel guilty when our kids get a divorce?
Well, you say accept the situation, though. Does that mean that parents should not sit down with their child, their adult child, and say, let's talk about this? Maybe there's something I could say that would help?
Well, I think if there was something that you could say that would help, you would have said it by now. And by the time your kids say we're getting a divorce, they've made up their minds. What you can say and should say, is there anything we can do? Is there anything we can offer you? Do you need to go to counseling? Not have any money? We can help with that.
In other words, show support.
Show support. But ultimately, it's their choice. And recriminations about their failure are not going to help. They're just going to drive you further away from them. And also, this, even though they don't think it's a failure and you do, this is where most of the dissonance between the generations comes in. We tend to think of divorce as a failure, partly because we're a generation that was divorced in huge numbers ourselves. And so if our kids get divorced, we think we provided a bad role model of marriage.
And that's where a lot of the guilt that you mentioned a second ago comes in. So look, I got divorced, and so my child obviously took my lead.
Exactly. And what we don't understand is that all kids, not just the kids of divorce, have a different attitude about marriage and divorce these days. Divorce is not the end of the world to them the way it was to us a generation ago. We came into marriage seeing our parents, often dysfunctional marriages, but they stayed together for the sake of the children. We were the first generation who felt free not to do that, not to stay together for the sake of the children, and yet 20 years later, when our kids are getting a divorce, we feel terribly guilty. One
of the things you say in the article, and I know this has got to be so difficult for parents to handle, is you say, don't get too involved.
That's right.
The problem here is this is the first chance they have to be a parent again after so many years where the child really didn't need them.
Well, but we are coaches. We're off stage. We shouldn't be taking center stage. This is about them. It's not about us and our unhappiness. And in fact, we're not such great guides for success in marriage ourselves. More important, we're not their therapists. We don't want to hear, we shouldn't want to hear the gory details. We need to respect their marital privacy, because you know what? Sometimes they say it and they aren't really sure they're getting a divorce later. And you know what? Everybody else will forgive him, but your mother never will.
But what about the situation where your child wants you to take their side? They want reassurance that they're right.
You can't be an advocate. You really can't. You need to stay out of it. They can find advocates with their lawyers, with their therapists. What you need to do is to be as neutral as possible and supportive as possible, not focus on their failure, to try to look ahead for them, to be there for the children if there are any, and not to assign blame. If you get in the middle and try to fix things, you're just going to make them worse.
You mentioned children. I want to talk about grandchildren in a second. But how should the parent of a child who's divorcing treat the spouse of that child?
I think, again, completely neutrally, unless there's been major physical abuse in which you can't help hating the son of a gun. But I think neutrally.
Or the daughter of a gun.
Or the daughter of a gun, that's true. I shouldn't be sexist here. Neutrally, because your daughter or your son still has very mixed feelings about that soon-to-be ex-partner. And so may you. You may feel, often many parents feel that they're losing an in-law, son or daughter-in-law that they've come to love and care about, and they're more angry with their own child than they are with the in-law.
And that spouse becomes very important when you start to deal with visiting grandchildren, especially.
You have to maintain your own relationship with the ex-spouse, if you want to, particularly if the ex-spouse has custody, if it's your daughter-in-law, say, and she has custody of the children. You have to maintain your own relationship, because if you give her a good reason not to be involved in your grandchildren's life, she or he may take it.
One of the last things I want to talk about, and you mentioned in the article, is parents should not treat their children like infants.
It's very easy to infantilize your kids when they come home after a marital failure. And it's very seductive, because it's really nice to be needed again after all these years when you weren't. But ultimately, you need to let go again and let them create a new life for themselves. It's a passage that you both have to go through as a parent of a truly adult child. So don't get too attached to that being needed again.
Jane Addams, the article is in the September issue of New Choices magazine. Good talking to you.
Thank you so much.